Hi everybody, today we're going to be adding hit particles to our enemies, something that we hadn't done previously, and I made them really big in Godot just so it was easy to see them here in this example. But we're going to make sure that this is hooked up easily to our enemy. We want it to be something that's ultra modular, just drop in, plug and play if you will, so we don't have to do any extra code to make it work. And we'll even make it robust enough that you could just drop it into any old node that has a damage area, and it should connect to that as well, so that you can have hit particles emitting without any extra code. Hi, my name is Michael. Join me as we build an epic Metroidvania game in Godot 4 using GD script. This is the Metroidvania Forge. So one thing that we've integrated throughout our game are these particles. You know, we've got them here on like this test dummy as well as these breakable objects, but our enemies don't yet have any particles. And I want to actually kind of reapproach how we implement the particles. We're going to still use our global particle system, but we're going to use a simple drop-in node that we can drop into any enemy that needs particles. So it'll just kind of streamline that process. Okay, we'll begin. I'm going to go to my enemy script folder, and I'm just going to drop this script right in here. Just create a new script, and we'll call it something like enemy particles or something like that. Maybe enemy hit particles. It's a little more accurate. Okay. And we can, of course, give it a class name that matches that. And I do have an icon for this one. So if you've grabbed that from the itch.io page, we can drop that in here. And let's see, where's that at? General, icons. It's called EnemyHitParticles. Boom. Okay. Now this is going to just extend a marker 2D. And this is a node we haven't used a whole lot yet. We're going to use it a few times though here with the enemies. So a marker 2D, we'll show you what it looks like. It's kind of like a node 2D, but just less, but it does display like a little crosshair wherever you place it. So it's kind of handy for that purpose. You can use it to mark a location. In this case, it will be the location that the particles emit from. Okay, so let's go ahead and just add that. And we just need to define a couple variables in this script so that we can use it. Obviously, if we're going to emit particles, we want to kind of keep a reference to what those particles look like. So just like we've done in previous scripts, like our breakables and things like that, we'll keep an array. And this is going to handle both hit particles and the particles maybe when an enemy dies. So here's what we'll do. We're going to export hit particles, which will be an array of the hit particle settings. Okay, so this is probably familiar if you've been following along. And then this one will be called death particles, I guess. And we need one other variable. It's just going to help us distinguish between regular hit particles and death particles. So I'm going to have a variable here that I'm going to just call enemy was killed, which is a Boolean, and we'll set it to false by default. Okay, and how we use that will become a little bit more apparent later. So this is going to be a pretty straightforward script. I'm going to go ahead and come in here and strip out this process. We don't need the process. We will use the ready function. So we can begin here just doing the typical setup that we have. Because we want this to be a modular node that we can just drop in and it kind of works on its own, we don't want any other node to have to be aware of it. Okay, so how we'll do that is we'll make sure that we'll detect if this is the child of an enemy, if the owner scene is an enemy, and if so, we'll just hook up the signals that we need, and then this node will just handle the rest. Okay, so we'll do our check here. We'll say if owner is enemy. Okay, so if the owner, meaning the root node of this scene, is an enemy node, then we'll know that we want to do the rest of the code. And then I guess technically we'll have an else. Okay, and so we'll hook that up as well. I do want this else to be kind of robust because I want this node to be usable, maybe even if the owner isn't an enemy. So let's say you just want to use this in the future and you just drop it into another node that has a damage area. I want this to still work. So we'll approach that in the else condition here. And I'm going to go ahead and add a pass to this one so we can hook it up later. But otherwise, if it is an owner, then it's as simple as saying owner dot, let's see, there's a was hit dot connect, right? We have this signal. Let's go check our enemy out. Okay, was hit. Let's make sure we're emitting this. I believe we should be. Yeah, so anytime we take damage, we emit this. And anytime we're killed, we emit the was killed. Okay, so that's going to come into play as well. So here we're just going to say on hit. And then we'll say owner dot was killed. Oops. And we can connect to this as well. And we'll just have an onKilled function. And we'll create these. I'm going to go ahead and create the onKilled first. And then we'll make the onHit right here. Now, it's worth noting and remembering that this onHit, let's go back to it. It does include the attack area. Okay, I'm actually going to go ahead and copy that. And so we need to update our function here to be looking for that attack area. So these are the basic functions that we need for this to work, right? A way to handle a connection when it was hit and when it was killed. And really all we're going to do, I'm going to finish the onKilled right now, because all we need to do with onKilled is just set this variable that we have here, this enemy was killed, to true. And that's all that we're going to use for that. Now, I do need to point this out again. Looking at the was hit and the was killed here in our enemy, you'll notice that in the case where the damage does kill the enemy, the was killed signal will be emitted first. And then once that's done, it will still emit a was hit. Okay, so we're still going to get both signals, and that was intentional. And so what will happen here is we'll always call this on hit even when the enemy is killed. But in the case where it was killed, it will set this value to true first, and then this signal will get picked up. Okay, so that's going to influence how this works, and then we can use that knowledge to change how we write our code in here, and to, I guess, make it handle that situation when the enemy was killed properly. Okay, so let's go ahead and just kind of flesh out this on hit. Now, this is going to work just like other scripts we've written in the past to handle particles. Obviously, we're just making it a very simple modular node to handle it. And so what we'll do is we want to detect the direction. This is going to be the direction that our particles are flying. And so this will be a vector2. And what we'll do is we're just going to get the direction to the attack area. So we've got this marker, okay? So we're going to use its global position. And then we're going to get the direction to, and then what we'll use is the attack area that we passed in. So a.global position. Okay. So pretty straightforward. That's going to give us a direction. Now you'll notice one thing that's different. I think in previous scripts where we wrote this, we calculated the direction on the x-axis only and set the y to 0. I think we did that in most cases. This one's going to have it include the y-axis. So if you hit an enemy above you slightly, then that direction is going to have an upward component to it. Okay, so it's going to change the trajectory of the particles, but our particle system will support that. We've already tested that. I don't know if you remember when we built that back in the day, but you know, we could shoot particles up or down or to the side. And then what we need to do is we need to iterate through our particles and emit them. And we have two different types, right? We have hit particles and death particles. And what we want to do is we want to use the hit particles unless the enemy was killed. And we'll use the death particles in that case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say variable particles. Okay. And I'm just going to set it equal to the hit particles, which seems kind of silly, right? But the reason I'm going to do this is so that we can eliminate having some extra conditions or redundant code below. And so this is kind of just a code optimization here. So now I'll do a check. I'm going to say if the enemy was killed, then I know, hey, I need to actually use the death particles. So I'm going to reassign particles. I'm going to say actually particles equals the death particles in that case. Okay. So you can see we still are using this one particles variable. And then what we do down here is we'll say for p in particles. And then we can emit the particles, right? And so I hope that makes sense, right? We're basically just saying, okay, these are our particles. Unless we were killed, then let's use these ones instead. And now we don't have to have this code twice, because otherwise we'd have to say, okay, if enemy was killed, then let's loop through the death particles, or then we'd have an else and it would say, then we'll loop through the hit particles. Instead, we'll just assign them and have one piece of code that does that looping. And this is going to work again, just like what we've built in previous videos. So this isn't anything crazy. All I'm going to do is I'm going to say visual effects dot hit particles. And we just have to provide these values here, right? The position, the direction, and the hit particle setting. So position is going to be the global position. Because this is a marker 2D, it does have a global position. The direction we've calculated up above, dir. And then lastly, we just pass in p. So this way, if you assign, 3 or 4 different particles to the hit effect, then each of them will get emitted one by one with this code. Okay. And I mean, that's pretty much it. This node is pretty much ready to go. We are going to come back and handle the case where we don't have an enemy that's an owner. We're going to see if we can still make use of this node. Okay, but let's go ahead and save this, and then let's drop it into our slime and see if we can get it working. Okay, the moment of truth is coming pretty quick on this one. So let's open Slime 2, and I'm going to go to 2D. And here we're just going to drop in one of these. So Control A, and I'm going to find a enemy hit particles. There we go. And there's the node. Okay, we've just dropped it in. Now let's look at this node. You can see, I don't know how well you can see that. We've got these green and red lines. So you can kind of see where that's positioned. We just want to position this where we want the particles to emit from. So I'm just going to drag it up a little bit from that center. And that's all we need to do there. And then the other thing we need to do is we need to come into our hit and death particles and actually assign some particles, okay? So I'm going to give one particle for hit. And I'm just going to make a new hit particle settings. I'm not going to use one of my existing ones. Let's increase this to 12, and we'll make the color a blue color. So that way it fits with the slime, and we'll call it good, okay? And then I'm going to go ahead and just take this, and I'm going to make a, can I do a copy? There it is, copy. And down here in death particles, I'm going to have 2. For this first one, I'm going to paste as unique, and then I'm going to paste as unique again. So I've got some particles here, 12 of them. And then let's do a different style of particle. I'm not going to make like a texture for these. Just going to do a different color. Actually, maybe I want to do like white. I don't know. And maybe increase the value of this, or actually this one's pretty good. Let's decrease this to 8, and then let's increase the blue ones to 24, something like that. So we'll just get a little bit of variety in there. Okay, so we've got 2 different particle arrays defined, our hit and our death. And all we've done is drop this into the scene tree of our enemy. But the slime, you can see that this script is an enemy script on him. So if we wrote our code properly, then it should work. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And let's run my playground here. And let's give a whack. All right. They're actually hard to see because it's a blue background. And I'm thinking that the direction is backwards. I don't know if you noticed that. Let's go ahead and do something so that it's a little bit easier to see. I'm going to go ahead and select this. And on the hit, I am going to give it a texture. Let's go ahead and, well, let's do this. Let's just create a new texture here. So I'm going to go down to, where's my gradient texture 2D that I love oh so much? Okay, because remember, our color is going to modulate this texture when we've done this. So let's go ahead and do something like this. I'm going to drag these from center and top center. I'm going to turn on the fill to a radial fill, and then the size can be smaller. I'm going to make it 8 by 8 pixels, which is probably too big, but it'll be obvious this way at least. And then I'm going to make the main color white and drag it kind of to the middle-ish, and then take this second color stop and just give it transparency. So we've got this little simple fuzzy Gaussian blurred orb. Okay, let's run this again and let's just see what this does. Okay, so much bigger, much easier to see. Now you can see that they were flying the wrong direction. So aside from the fact that they're going the wrong direction, it worked. Okay, let's fix that directionality issue. It's pretty straightforward. You guys are probably guessing already what the fix is if you haven't implemented it already. There's a couple ways we could do this. We just need it to be negative, but we don't want the Y direction to be negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take our direction dot X, and we're going to do multiply equals -1. Okay. So that's just going to flip the X direction, but leave the Y alone. And now if we run again, it should look a lot better. There we go. Okay. So now that the sprites, or now that the particles are flying in the correct direction, let's handle this other edge case. Okay, I'm going to come in here to my playground, and I'm going to add a sprite, and I've actually copied the slime sprite from my slime up here just to make this quick. Okay, because what we're going to do is I'm going to build an example. This is not the proper enemy, but I want to just test to see if this can work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume I've got just a random entity in the world, and this could be a scene. In this case, it'll just be a simple node. Okay, it's this slime, and let's go ahead and modulate him so it's obvious that he's different. Woo, okay, kind of yellowy. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, in this sprite, I'm going to add our enemy hit particles. Got some good music going. I wish I could play it for you guys. Okay, so there's our enemy hit particles. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to copy again. I'm going to copy these. I don't want to have to configure I don't want to have to configure the particle settings again. So there we go. Just paste that in there. Now it's got some particles already assigned. And then we just need a damage area. And you know what? I'm going to do the same thing. Where's my damage area? Copy that. Come over here. Paste the damage area. Where is the damage area? Is it there? Oh, its visibility is turned off. Duh. Okay, here we go. Damage area, enemy hit particles. That's fine. Let's drag it up here. This will be an example. Okay, so what's happening here is I've just got this random entity and these things are together. It's not configured properly, so if I were to run it right now, it's not going to work, right? But I think it'll make a sound. Yeah, because that damage area is still registering the hit, right? So we want our enemy hit particles to be kind of similar. And so here's what I'm going to do. Go back to our script. We can do this a couple different ways, but what I'm going to do in this else statement is I'm going to just check. It's probably best if we still use the owner, okay? But in this case, that's not going to work well because the owner is going to be our playground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something different, and then we'll probably switch it over to using the get owner. So I'm going to say for C in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say get parent dot get children. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check, okay, let's look at the parent node, right? In this case, that's this sprite 2D, and then I'm going to iterate through its children. This hit particle will be one of those children, but what we're going to do is check and see if we have a damage area, okay? And then if we do, we can connect to those same signals. So let's go ahead and do this. Then we can say, we got to check if C is damage area. Then we can connect to the hit. So we'll say C dot, actually it's not hit, right? It's actually the damage taken signal. Connect, and we can still use the on hit. Okay. Now what's nice about this is this damage taken, it emits that attack area. So it's still gonna work just fine down here. We don't have to make any changes to that code. So now if this worked, I should be emitting particles from this slime down here. Yeah, there we go. And you can see it's shooting from up here because that's where I drug that that marker 2D, right? It's clear up here. Now, there's one flaw with this. We don't necessarily have a way to know if this was killed. You could extend that little else statement to check and see like if there's, you know, any other script that you could connect a signal to know if it was killed or destroyed. But for now, I'm just going to leave it at that. It will still emit particles. Even if this were able to be destroyed, it would still emit the hit particles, right? And so that's a nice, quick, and easy to use solution that we can kind of just drop in. So now we could drop these hit particles into any enemy or as a sibling of any damage area node, and it's just going to work. Now, so there's two pieces of homework if you want to do it, and I already have mentioned them, I guess. One would be to change this to check the owner, and that's just as simple as owner. But then you just have to make sure that you're only adding this hit particles to scenes that have, you know, a damage area as a sibling to it, as opposed to just any node. It's not going to change how it works. And in fact, this code is a little bit more flexible, so maybe I would just keep this as is. But the other one would be to see if you can figure out how to connect this to have a killed signal if there was some other node, okay? And I'm thinking specifically of something like this breakable, right? So if we look at the breakable, we've got a destroyed signal, okay? So you could hook into that. So there's just a couple things that you could do. You could check if the parent or a sibling is a breakable, and if so, connect to the destroyed signal, and then maybe just call this onKilled function, right? And just set the onKilled to true. And that will make it so that it does the different particles. But that's it for this one today. Kind of short and sweet. I just want to add a few more things in here before we build our next enemies so that it's a little bit more robust. All right. Well, thank you for watching. I know this was kind of a really quick episode, but I hope it kind of illustrated a few ways that we can keep this modular component-based approach going. And it's really going to make things easier in the future. And it's just fun to dig into the compositional nature of the Godot engine. You know, typically Godot by its nature builds things in this component-like system, right? Because everything is a node and nodes can have functionality. And I just like building nodes that are smart so that they're easy to use, because I don't want to have to wire everything together with code and make it complicated. So thanks again for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them in the comment section below. And then if you want to see what's coming next as we're continuing to work on these enemies, then please subscribe if you haven't already. just a quick note for those of you who are new and don't know, I don't always mention this, but I do have a Patreon. So if you want to support me there, you can. Patreon members have access to a couple additional code repositories, one of which is the code repository for the Metroidvania Forge series that we're watching right now. So if you want access to that, then you can subscribe at the Pixel Adventurer tier and you'll have that access to that code repo. And of course, I've also got a wonderful Discord server, and it's full of a lot of awesome new and learning devs, and some who are actually quite advanced and doing some pretty awesome stuff, but all of them are willing to help out. So if you want to join that, and if you've got questions or problems that you're trying to work out, join that group, share with us, show us what you're doing, and you can ask for help as well, and we'd be happy to help you. So with that, thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you next time.